Emma and Daniel were the embodiment of a modern fairy tale. Their love story had inspired envy among friends and family alike. From their first meeting at a charity gala to their picturesque wedding in the vineyards of Tuscany, everything about them seemed flawless. Their shared Instagram account boasted photos of romantic getaways, cozy nights by the fireplace, and moments of shared laughter. To the outside world, they had it all. A beautiful home in the suburbs, successful careers, and an undeniable chemistry that everyone admired. But perfection is often a facade. Emma's routine that morning started like any other. She brewed her favorite coffee, stretched by the bay window, and mentally reviewed her packed schedule. Daniel had already left for work after a quick kiss on her cheek, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne. Everything felt normal, until a knock on the door disrupted the calm. On the doorstep was a plain white envelope, unmarked except for Emma's name scrawled in blocky handwriting. Curious but cautious, she opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with a message that made her heart race. "He's not who you think he is." The words felt ominous, intrusive, like a stranger had entered her sanctuary. Who would send such a thing? Was it a cruel prank? Or could it be something worse? Shaking off the unease, Emma tossed the note in the trash. She told herself not to dwell on it. After all, she and Daniel had been together for nearly a decade. Their bond had weathered ups and downs, from career struggles to the loss of her father. If there was one thing Emma was sure of, it was Daniel's love and loyalty. Yet as the day wore on, the note lingered in her mind. That night, as she prepared dinner, Emma tried to bring it up casually. "Have you ever felt like someone might be watching us?" she asked, chopping vegetables with deliberate focus. Daniel's response was immediate but dismissive. "Watching us? Why would anyone do that? You've been watching too many crime shows." He chuckled, but his tone felt forced. Emma dropped the subject, though a knot of discomfort remained in her chest. Over the next few days, small but strange occurrences began to add to her unease. Daniel started receiving late-night phone calls, always excusing himself to take them in another room. He became oddly protective of his phone, keeping it face down or tucked in his pocket. He even changed the passcode, something he'd never done before. One evening, while folding laundry, Emma found a receipt in the pocket of Daniel's blazer. It was for a restaurant they'd never been to, dated from a night he'd claimed to be working late. The knot in her chest tightened further. Was she overthinking things? Or was there someone Daniel wasn't telling her about? Emma's thoughts circled back to the note. Maybe it hadn't been a prank after all. Maybe it was a warning. And if it was, who had sent it? The questions churned in her mind, keeping her awake long after Daniel had fallen asleep beside her. Staring at the ceiling in the dark, Emma resolved to find out the truth, whatever it might be. She had no idea that her seemingly perfect life was about to unravel in ways she could never have imagined. Emma and Daniel were the embodiment of a modern fairy tale. Their love story had inspired envy among friends and family alike. From their first meeting at a charity gala to their picturesque wedding in the vineyards of Tuscany, everything about them seemed flawless. Their shared Instagram account boasted photos of romantic getaways, cozy nights by the fireplace, and moments of shared laughter. To the outside world, they had it all. A beautiful home in the suburbs, successful careers, and an undeniable chemistry that everyone admired. But perfection is often a facade. Emma's routine that morning started like any other. She brewed her favorite coffee, stretched by the bay window, and mentally reviewed her packed schedule. Daniel had already left for work after a quick kiss on her cheek, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne. Everything felt normal, until a knock on the door disrupted the calm. On the doorstep was a plain white envelope, unmarked except for Emma's name scrawled in blocky handwriting. Curious but cautious, she opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with a message that made her heart race. "He's not who you think he is." The words felt ominous, intrusive, like a stranger had entered her sanctuary. Who would send such a thing? Was it a cruel prank? Or could it be something worse? Shaking off the unease, Emma tossed the note in the trash. She told herself not to dwell on it. After all, she and Daniel had been together for nearly a decade. Their bond had weathered ups and downs, from career struggles to the loss of her father. If there was one thing Emma was sure of, it was Daniel's love and loyalty. Yet as the day wore on, the note lingered in her mind. That night, as she prepared dinner, Emma tried to bring it up casually. "Have you ever felt like someone might be watching us?" she asked, chopping vegetables with deliberate focus. Daniel's response was immediate but dismissive. "Watching us? Why would anyone do that? You've been watching too many crime shows." He chuckled, but his tone felt forced. Emma dropped the subject, though a knot of discomfort remained in her chest. Over the next few days, small but strange occurrences began to add to her unease. Daniel started receiving late-night phone calls, always excusing himself to take them in another room. He became oddly protective of his phone, keeping it face down or tucked in his pocket. He even changed the passcode, something he'd never done before. One evening, while folding laundry, Emma found a receipt in the pocket of Daniel's blazer. It was for a restaurant they'd never been to, dated from a night he'd claimed to be working late. The knot in her chest tightened further. Was she overthinking things? Or was there someone Daniel wasn't telling her about? Emma's thoughts circled back to the note. Maybe it hadn't been a prank after all. Maybe it was a warning. And if it was, who had sent it? The questions churned. Just the usual, nothing exciting. Emma's stomach churned. His casual lie only deepened her doubts. She decided to let it go for the moment, but she knew she couldn't ignore the growing list of red flags. Later that night, while Daniel slept soundly beside her, Emma couldn't help but replay the day's events in her mind. Something wasn't right, and she was determined to get to the bottom of it. The turning point came a few days later. Daniel had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he stepped outside to take a call. The screen lit up with a notification. A message from an unknown number that read, "Can't wait to see you tonight." Emma's heart stopped. Her hands trembled as she stared at the message, her mind racing with questions. Who was texting Daniel? And what did they mean by tonight? When Daniel returned, Emma pretended nothing was amiss, but the message haunted her. She felt like a stranger in her own home, consumed by doubts and suspicions. She needed answers, but she wasn't sure how to get them, or if she was ready to face the truth. Emma's suspicions had grown unbearable. The unknown text message lingered in her mind, a constant reminder of her husband's possible betrayal. She found herself second-guessing every interaction, every word he spoke. She needed to know the truth, even if it shattered her. It was Clara, her best friend since college, who gave her the push she needed. Over coffee at their favorite cafe, Emma finally broke down and shared everything. The note, the late-night calls, the secretive behavior, and the damning text message. Clara leaned forward, her face a mix of concern and determination. "You can't let this eat you alive, Em. If he's hiding something, you deserve to know. And if he's not well, you'll finally have peace of mind." Emma hesitated, staring into her untouched latte. But how? How do I even begin to figure it out? Clara's eyes narrowed with a mischievous glint. "We follow him." Emma's heart raced at the suggestion. It felt wrong, invasive, but wasn't that what Daniel had been doing to their marriage? Invading their trust? With Clara's encouragement, Emma agreed to confront her fears head-on. A few nights later, they put their plan into action. Daniel had told Emma he'd be working late again. As soon as he left, Emma and Clara followed him in Clara's car, staying far enough back to avoid suspicion. Daniel drove to an upscale restaurant downtown, one Emma had never been to. He parked and entered, seemingly at ease. Emma's stomach turned as she and Clara watched from the car. Minutes later, a striking woman in a red dress approached Daniel's table. She leaned down, kissed his cheek, and sat across from him. They laughed, their heads close together, completely absorbed in each other. Tears stung Emma's eyes as the scene unfolded. She wanted to storm in, demand answers, but Clara held her back. "Not here," Clara whispered. "You need more than this." Emma reluctantly agreed. She took photos from the car, her hands shaking as she captured evidence of the betrayal. Watching them share an intimate meal was agony, but it fueled her resolve. She needed to confront Daniel, but on her terms, with no room for lies or excuses. When Daniel returned, Emma waited for the right moment to confront Daniel, and when it came, she couldn't hold back. She chose a quiet Sunday evening, when they were alone in the house. Her hands were clammy as she placed her phone on the coffee table, the incriminating photos displayed on the screen. "Daniel, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. He looked up from his book, his brow furrowing slightly. "What's wrong?" "I know about her," Emma said, locking eyes with him. Daniel froze, his face a mask of confusion that quickly gave way to defensiveness. "What are you talking about?" Emma picked up her phone and thrust it toward him. "I followed you, Daniel. I saw you with her." "Who is she?" His face turned pale as he stared at the photos. For a moment he said nothing, as if weighing his options. Then he sighed and rubbed his temples. "Emma, it's not what it looks like." Her voice cracked as anger bubbled to the surface. "Don't you dare lie to me. I saw you with her. I saw the way you looked at her. Don't insult me by pretending it's nothing." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "Her name is Vanessa," he admitted quietly. "She's someone I've been seeing." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She felt the air leave her lungs as the truth she had been dreading finally spilled out. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months, he replied, unable to meet her eyes. Tears streamed down Emma's face, but her anger burned brighter than her pain. 6 months? 6 months of lies? Of sneaking around? How could you do this to me, to us? "I didn't mean for it to happen," Daniel said, his voice thick with guilt. "It just happened."
"I'm sorry, Emma."
"I never wanted to hurt you."
"Sorry."
Emma spat. "You're sorry you got caught. You've destroyed everything we built together, and for what? Some fling." "It's not a fling," Daniel said, his voice barely audible. Emma's breath caught. "What does that mean?" Daniel looked up at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I think I'm in love with her." The room spun around Emma as her world crumbled. She didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the realization that the man she loved had fallen for someone else. "I can't do this," she said, her voice shaking. "You need to leave. Now." "Emma, please. Get out!" she screamed, her fury giving her strength. Daniel hesitated, but the look in her eyes left no room for argument. He grabbed his keys and walked out the door, leaving Emma alone with the shattered remains of their life together. The days that followed felt like a blur to Emma. She called in sick to work, unable to face the world while her heart was in pieces. Clara checked in on her constantly, bringing food and sitting with her in silence when words weren't enough. "I don't even know who I am without him," Emma admitted one night, her voice thick with tears. "You're Emma," Clara said firmly. "You're strong, smart, and kind, and you'll get through this." But Emma didn't feel strong. She felt lost and broken, the weight of Daniel's betrayal pressing down on her like a suffocating blanket. She spent hours replaying their relationship in her mind, questioning everything. Had there been signs she had missed? Moments when he had tried to tell her the truth? One evening, while scrolling through old photos on her phone, Emma stumbled across a picture from their honeymoon. They were smiling on a beach, their arms wrapped around each other, looking every bit like a couple in love. She stared at the photo until her vision blurred, the image of their happiness now tainted by Daniel's betrayal. Clara encouraged Emma to see a therapist, and though she was hesitant at first, Emma eventually agreed. Her sessions became a lifeline, a place where she could pour out her pain and begin to process her emotions. "Betrayal is like a wound," her therapist said during one session. "It hurts, it bleeds, and it takes time to heal. But you will heal, Emma. And when you do, you'll be stronger for it." Those words stayed with Emma as she began to rebuild her life. She focused on herself for the first time in years, rediscovering old hobbies and exploring new interests. Slowly but surely, she started to feel like herself again. But as she found her footing, Emma couldn't shake the lingering anger. Daniel had walked away from their marriage without facing the consequences of his actions. She wanted closure, but more than that, she wanted justice. And she was determined to get it. Emma's resolve to uncover the full extent of Daniel's betrayal pushed her into uncharted territory. She hired a private investigator, something she never thought she'd do. It felt extreme, even invasive, but she needed answers. Answers Daniel had refused to provide. The investigator, a sharp and discreet woman named Lisa, assured Emma that her instincts weren't wrong. "If he's been hiding something, we'll find it," Lisa said confidently. Days turned into a week, and then the first report arrived. Emma's stomach churned as she opened the envelope. Inside were photos, receipts, and details that painted a picture of a man she barely recognized. Daniel had been living a double life. The investigation revealed multiple late-night hotel stays, charges at upscale restaurants, and even a luxury apartment rented under his name. Emma's heart sank as she realized the scale of his deception. The apartment was where he'd been meeting Vanessa, a place he'd furnished with expensive furniture and trinkets, all funded by the joint account Emma had trusted him with. But the most shocking discovery wasn't about Vanessa. Lisa had uncovered something far darker. Daniel had been funneling money into a hidden account. Thousands of dollars were missing, and Emma had no idea where it had gone. Lisa handed Emma a folder with additional documents. "This isn't just about infidelity," she said gravely. "There's something more going on here." Emma's hands trembled as she flipped through the papers. Bank statements, signed agreements, and even emails between Daniel and an unknown party hinted at a financial scheme involving offshore accounts. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was criminal. How could he do this? Emma whispered, tears welling in her eyes. How could he lie to me like this? Lisa placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're stronger than you think. You need to decide what to do next." For the first time since discovering the affair, Emma's heartbreak was eclipsed by anger. Daniel hadn't just betrayed their marriage, he'd used her trust to fund his secret life. She wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. That night, Emma began to plan her next move. She contacted her lawyer, determined to freeze the joint account and protect what little remained of her finances. She also gathered the evidence Lisa had collected, preparing to confront Daniel once and for all. But as she stared at the stack of documents on her desk, a chilling thought crept into her mind. If Daniel was capable of this level of deception, what else was he hiding? She wasn't just fighting for closure anymore. She was fighting for her future. Emma stood in the middle of her living room, staring at the damning evidence spread out on the coffee table. Photos of Daniel with Vanessa, documents detailing the secret apartment, and bank records of his financial deceit. Each piece of paper felt like a dagger to her heart, a reminder of just how thoroughly he had betrayed her. But this wasn't a time to break down. This was a time to act. Emma had contacted her lawyer earlier in the day and now had a clear plan in place. She'd freeze their joint account immediately and file for separation. She wasn't going to let Daniel use her trust and her money any longer. When Daniel walked through the door that evening, Emma was ready. He paused in the entryway, taken aback by the cold, resolute expression on her face. "We need to talk," Emma said, her voice steady. Daniel sighed, setting his briefcase down. "Emma, I don't want to fight. Can't we just—" "No," she interrupted, holding up one of the photos Lisa had taken. "You're not going to talk your way out of this. I know everything, Daniel. About Vanessa, the apartment, the money you've been siphoning from our account. All of it." His face went pale, and for a moment, he looked like a man on the verge of panic. Then his expression hardened. "I don't know what you think you've discovered, but don't lie to me," Emma shouted, slamming the photo down on the table. "I hired a private investigator, Daniel. I have proof. Proof of your affair, proof of your lies, proof of everything. So don't stand there and pretend you're innocent." Daniel's mouth opened and closed as if searching for the right words. Finally, he sighed and sank into a chair. "Fine," he said quietly. "You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Vanessa. And yes, I took money from the account. But it's not what you think." Emma crossed her arms, glaring at him. Then enlighten me, Daniel. What exactly am I supposed to think when my husband is living a double life? I was trying to protect you, he said, his tone defensive. Protect me? Emma repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. Daniel nodded. I got involved in something complicated. A business deal that went south. I needed money to fix it, and I didn't want you to worry. Emma stared at him in stunned silence. You expect me to believe that you were stealing from me and having an affair for my own good? It wasn't supposed to happen this way, Daniel said, running a hand through his hair. Vanessa. She was part of the deal. It started as business and then… Don't, Emma snapped, holding up a hand. Don't you dare try to justify this. Emma, I swear I was going to fix everything, he said, his voice cracking. I just needed more time. Time for what? To completely destroy our marriage? To ruin everything we built together? Emma shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You're a liar, Daniel. You've been lying to me for months, and I can't. I won't live like this anymore. Emma, please, Daniel pleaded, reaching for her. I made mistakes, but I love you. I can fix this. I can make it right. She stepped back, her voice cold and resolute. It's too late for that. Emma grabbed the stack of evidence from the table and shoved it into a folder. I'm filing for separation, and I'm freezing the account, so don't even think about taking another cent. Daniel looked like he'd been slapped. You don't mean that. I do, Emma said firmly. You've made your choices, Daniel. Now I'm making mine. She walked out of the room, leaving him sitting there in stunned silence. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a glimmer of control over her life. Daniel's betrayal had shattered her, but it hadn't destroyed her, and she was determined to make sure he paid for what he'd done. Emma thought she had uncovered the full extent of Daniel's betrayal, but as she dug deeper into the evidence Lisa had provided, she realized there was more to the story than just infidelity and theft. Late one night, as she pored over emails and financial records, a pattern began to emerge, one that hinted at a much larger conspiracy. Several of the transactions tied to the hidden account were linked to a company Emma had never heard of, Lumitech Ventures. A quick search revealed it to be a shell corporation with no legitimate business activity. Its registered address led to an empty office building in another state. Emma's heart pounded as she realized Daniel wasn't just funneling money into his own life. He was involved in something far more dangerous. The next morning, Emma met with Lisa to share her findings. Lisa's expression grew grim as Emma explained the connections she had uncovered. This isn't just about your marriage anymore, Lisa said. If he's tied to a fraudulent company, there could be legal implications, serious ones. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Do you think he's involved in something illegal? It's possible, Lisa said, but we need more information to be sure. If you're willing, I can dig deeper into Lumitech Ventures and see what we find. Emma hesitated. She wanted the truth, but she also feared what they might uncover. Still, she nodded. Do it. I need to know everything. While Lisa worked on the investigation, Emma focused on securing her own position. She met with her lawyer to ensure her assets were protected and began gathering documentation to support her case for separation. She even filed a formal complaint with the bank to flag the suspicious activity on their joint account. Days later, Lisa called with an update. Emma, I've uncovered something you need to see, she said. They met in Lisa's office, where she laid out a series of documents on the desk. Lumitech Ventures is part of a network of shell companies used to launder money, Lisa explained. It's connected to several offshore accounts and potentially a larger criminal organization. Based on Daniel's transactions, he's been funneling money into these accounts for months. Emma's stomach churned as she stared at the evidence. So, he's not just cheating on me, he's a criminal? It looks that way, Lisa said. And if the authorities find out, he could face serious charges. Emma sat back in her chair, her mind racing. This was more than she had ever expected. She thought she was dealing with a broken marriage, but now she was entangled in something far more dangerous. What do I do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa gave her a steady look. You have a choice. You can report this to the authorities and let them handle it, or you can confront Daniel yourself and see if he comes clean. Either way, you need to be prepared for what comes next. Emma left Lisa's office feeling overwhelmed but determined. Daniel had betrayed her trust, broken their marriage, and put her future at risk. She wasn't just fighting for closure anymore. She was fighting to protect herself from the fallout of his actions. That evening, she sat down at her desk and began drafting a letter to the authorities. Her hands trembled as she wrote, but she knew it was the right thing to do. Daniel had made his choices, and now he would have to face the consequences. As she sealed the envelope, a sense of calm washed over her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like she was taking control of her life again. Emma had spent weeks grieving, investigating, and trying to piece her life back together. But now, as she stared at the mounting evidence of Daniel's crimes, her heartbreak began to morph into something else: anger. She wasn't content with just filing a separation or reporting him to the authorities. She wanted him to feel the weight of what he had done. The idea of revenge had always seemed petty and beneath her, but this wasn't about pettiness. This was about justice. Daniel had lied to her, stolen from her, and risked her future by dragging her into his criminal activities. If he thought he could walk away unscathed, he was wrong. Emma began to strategize. First, she gathered all the evidence Lisa had uncovered: photos, financial records, emails, and even the details about Lumitech Ventures. She meticulously organized them into a comprehensive file. Then, she contacted her lawyer and discussed the legal implications of Daniel's actions. Her lawyer assured her that she had a solid case to protect herself and potentially bring charges against him. But Emma didn't stop there. She wanted to hit Daniel where it hurt the most: his reputation. Over the years, Daniel had built an image as a successful businessman and a charming, dependable husband. He thrived on the respect and admiration of his colleagues and friends. Emma decided to shatter that image. With Clara's help, she planned a confrontation that Daniel wouldn't see coming. The setting? A high-profile charity gala. A glamorous event where Daniel was scheduled to give a speech as one of the key sponsors. It was the perfect stage for his downfall. On the night of the event, Emma dressed in a sleek black gown that radiated confidence. She carried the folder of evidence in her clutch, her hands steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Clara accompanied her for moral support, whispering words of encouragement as they walked into the grand ballroom. Daniel spotted Emma as soon as she entered, his expression shifting from surprise to unease. He hadn't expected her to attend, especially after everything that had happened. He approached her cautiously, his smile forced. "Emma," he said, his tone smooth but uncertain. "I didn't think you'd come tonight." She met his gaze, her expression calm but unyielding. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Before Daniel could respond, the event organizer took the stage to announce his speech. He excused himself, visibly relieved to escape the tension. Emma watched as he walked up to the podium, the spotlight illuminating his polished appearance. As Daniel began his speech, Emma turned to Clara and gave her a nod. Clara discreetly approached the event's tech team and handed them a USB drive containing a presentation Emma had prepared. Within moments, the screens behind Daniel flickered, and the carefully curated slideshow of his accomplishments was replaced by a series of incriminating images and documents. The room fell silent as photos of Daniel with Vanessa appeared on the screen, followed by screenshots of the financial transactions tied to Lumitech Ventures. Gasps rippled through the audience as the extent of his deceit was laid bare. Daniel froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color as he turned to see the evidence displayed for all to see. Emma stood at the back of the room, her gaze locked on him. "This is the man you trust with your investments and your support," Emma said, her voice ringing out across the room. "But behind closed doors, he's a liar, a thief, and a fraud." The room erupted into whispers and murmurs as Daniel tried to regain control. "This is a mistake," he stammered. "It's not what it looks like." Emma stepped forward, holding up the folder of evidence. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like." And I have plenty more where that came from. Security arrived to escort Emma out, but the damage was already done. As she left the venue, she could hear the chaos unfolding behind her. Daniel's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and for the first time in weeks, Emma felt a sense of vindication. She knew this was only the beginning. The authorities would handle the rest, and Daniel would face the consequences of his actions. But for Emma, the moment was a turning point, a declaration that she would no longer be a victim. The morning after the gala, Emma woke to a flood of notifications on her phone. Her actions had caused a stir that rippled far beyond the charity event. Social media was abuzz with photos, videos, and shocked reactions from those who had witnessed Daniel's public downfall. News outlets picked up the story, labeling it a scandal of epic proportions. Emma scrolled through the posts, seeing headlines like "Respected Businessman Exposed," "The Double Life of Daniel Carter," and "Charity Gala Drama." Fraud allegations surface in shocking display. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Daniel's name was trending for all the wrong reasons, and his professional reputation was in ruins. Clara called later that morning, her voice brimming with pride. "You were incredible last night," she said. "The way you handled it, calm, composed, and completely devastating. I'm in awe." "Thanks, Clara," Emma said, though her voice carried a hint of exhaustion. The confrontation had taken a toll on her, both emotionally and physically. "I just hope it was worth it." "Oh, it was," Clara assured her. "Trust me, everyone knows the truth now. And Daniel? He's done." Emma wasn't so sure. As satisfying as it was to see Daniel face the consequences of his actions, she knew the battle wasn't over. The legal proceedings would take time, and there was always the possibility that Daniel would try to spin the situation in his favor. Her fears were confirmed when she received an email from his lawyer later that day. The tone was predictably defensive, accusing Emma of defamation and threatening legal action if she didn't retract her public accusations. Emma forwarded the email to her own lawyer, who quickly dismissed it as an empty threat. "This is typical damage control," her lawyer explained during a call. "Daniel's trying to intimidate you into silence, but he doesn't have a leg to stand on. You've got the evidence to back up every claim you've made." Despite her lawyer's reassurances, Emma couldn't shake the anxiety that lingered in the back of her mind. She had taken a bold step by exposing Daniel, but bold steps often came with unforeseen consequences. Meanwhile, Daniel's life was unraveling at a rapid pace. His business partners began distancing themselves, publicly condemning his actions and terminating their associations with him. Investors pulled out of deals, and his company's stock plummeted. Vanessa, the woman at the center of the scandal, reportedly fled the city, unwilling to face the public scrutiny. Emma's own life, however, was slowly beginning to stabilize. She found solace in the support of her friends and family, who rallied around her during the difficult transition. Clara, ever the optimist, encouraged her to focus on rebuilding and moving forward. "You've already taken the hardest step," Clara said over dinner one night. "Now it's about finding yourself again." Emma nodded, though the path ahead still felt uncertain. She had spent so much of her life as Daniel's wife, building a future that now lay in ruins. Rediscovering who she was without him was both daunting and liberating. As the weeks went on, Emma began to see glimmers of hope. She threw herself into work, taking on new challenges that reignited her passion for her career. She started attending yoga classes, reconnecting with her body and mind, and slowly, she began to feel a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. One evening, as she sat on her porch with a glass of wine, Emma allowed herself to reflect on everything she had been through. The pain of Daniel's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer consumed her. She had faced the truth, taken control, and reclaimed her life. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt free. With the fallout from Daniel's scandal beginning to settle, Emma found herself standing at a crossroads. She had endured heartbreak, betrayal, and the collapse of a life she had once cherished. But now, she was ready to move forward, to rebuild, not as someone defined by her pain, but as someone stronger because of it. Therapy became a cornerstone of Emma's healing process. Her therapist, Dr. Keaton, guided her through the complicated emotions she still wrestled with: anger, sadness, and even guilt. Betrayal shakes the foundation of everything you believe to be true, Dr. Keaton told her during one session. It's natural to question yourself, to wonder what you could have done differently. But none of this is your fault, Emma. Daniel's actions are a reflection of him, not you. Those words resonated deeply, helping Emma let go of the self-blame she had carried for weeks. Slowly, she began to focus on the future instead of dwelling on the past. Emma also started reconnecting with old friends, people she had unintentionally drifted away from during her marriage. One by one, they welcomed her back with open arms, offering laughter, support, and reminders of the vibrant, independent woman she had once been. "You seem lighter," Clara remarked one afternoon as they strolled through the park. "It's like you're finally coming back to yourself." Emma smiled, feeling the truth in Clara's words. She was beginning to feel lighter, freer. The weight of Daniel's lies no longer pressed down on her. Instead, she was rediscovering her passions, her confidence, and her sense of purpose. One of the biggest steps in Emma's healing process was reclaiming her space. After weeks of deliberation, she decided to sell the house she had shared with Daniel. The memories it held were too painful, and she craved a fresh start. Packing up her belongings was both cathartic and bittersweet. She sifted through old photos, mementos, and tokens of a life that now felt like someone else's. Some items she kept, reminders of the good times she had experienced. Others she donated or discarded, letting go of the pieces that no longer served her. Emma found a cozy apartment downtown, a space that felt entirely her own. Decorating it became a joyful process, a way of marking the beginning of this new chapter in her life. She filled the walls with art that inspired her, surrounded herself with books she had always meant to read, and created a home that reflected who she was becoming. But even as she moved forward, there were moments of doubt and fear. What if she trusted someone again only to be hurt? What if she made the same mistakes? These thoughts crept in late at night, threatening to undermine the progress she had made. Dr. Keaton helped her address these fears head-on. "Healing doesn't mean you'll never feel afraid," she said. "It means you'll learn to trust yourself again, to trust that you can handle whatever life throws your way." Emma clung to those words as she took tentative steps toward opening herself up to new experiences. She joined a book club, started volunteering at a local animal shelter, and even signed up for a painting class, a hobby she had always wanted to explore but never had the time for. Through it all, she discovered a strength she hadn't realized she possessed. The woman who had once felt lost and broken was now thriving, carving out a life that was hers and hers alone. One evening, as Emma stood on the balcony of her new apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She still carried the scars of Daniel's betrayal, but they no longer defined her. For the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to hope, for love, for happiness, and for a future that was entirely her own. The sun was setting over the city, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the skyline as Emma stood on her balcony, a cup of tea cradled in her hands. It had been 6 months since the confrontation at the gala, 6 months since her world had crumbled and she had begun piecing it back together. The journey hadn't been easy, but as she breathed in the crisp evening air, she realized just how far she had come. Emma's life now felt like her own. She had a job she loved, friendships she had rekindled, and a sense of independence that she hadn't experienced in years. The emptiness that Daniel's betrayal had left behind was slowly being filled, not with someone else's love, but with her own. That morning, she had signed the final divorce papers. As she slid them into the envelope and sent them off, she felt no sadness, only relief. The chapter with Daniel was officially over. It wasn't the ending she had envisioned when they had exchanged vows, but it was an ending she had come to accept, and even embrace. To celebrate, Clara had organized a small dinner with a few close friends. As Emma arrived at the restaurant, she was greeted with cheers and laughter, a reminder of the support system that had carried her through her darkest days. "To new beginnings," Clara toasted, raising her glass. "To strength," Emma added, smiling as she clinked her glass with Clara's. The evening was filled with stories and laughter, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt truly present. She wasn't haunted by the past or anxious about the future. She was simply enjoying the moment. As the night wore on, a man approached their table. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Emma. "I couldn't help but notice you across the room. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I'd love to buy you a drink." Emma hesitated, her mind flashing to the walls she had carefully built around her heart. But something about his demeanor, earnest and respectful, put her at ease. "Thank you," she said, offering a polite smile. "But I'm with my friends tonight." He nodded, unfazed by the rejection. "Understood. If you ever change your mind, I'll be here." As he walked away, Clara leaned in with a mischievous grin. "He was cute." Emma laughed, shaking her head. "Baby steps, Clara. Baby steps." Later that night, as Emma lay in bed, she thought about the man's approach. It wasn't the first time someone had shown interest in her since her divorce, but it was the first time she hadn't felt dread at the thought of letting someone in. She wasn't ready yet, but the possibility no longer terrified her. Emma's life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was hers, and she had learned to find joy in its imperfections. The pain she had endured hadn't broken her. It had forged her into someone stronger, someone more self-assured. She thought back to the woman she had been a year ago, naive, trusting, and unaware of the storm that was about to upend her life. That woman had been shattered, but Emma had rebuilt herself piece by piece. And the woman she was now? She was unbreakable. As she drifted off to sleep, Emma allowed herself a moment of quiet gratitude. For the friends who had stood by her, for the strength she had found within herself, and for the future that lay ahead, unwritten, full of promise, and entirely her own. The past was behind her. The future was hers to create. And Emma was ready.